So a lot of things have been happening in the last week. It seems like I say this every week when I make a video. I'm like, last week, a bunch of stuff happened. But I put a poll out and I gave a couple of ideas of what I might talk about in this video. And most of you said talk about all of the above. But specifically, you said you wanted me to talk about these high-level meetings that have been happening. So there's three that I want to touch on. You guys probably know. It was the former president of Taiwan came to China for a meeting, and this is the first time a former president of Taiwan has actually come to China, foreign or current. This is like the first time this has ever happened. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and then we also had the current president had a stopover in the U.S. while going to Belize and I think Guatemala were her final destinations. Of course, that's a little bit of pretext because, of course, she wanted to go to the U.S. But there's a reason she's going down to the Central American countries because Taiwan's been losing support. Honduras recently said that they would recognize Beijing and not Taipei as like the true China. So obviously those were the two kind of meetings that involved Taiwan. And then we had the French president Macron come to Beijing for a state visit. But before we get into these meetings and before I start talking about that, we are very close, and it might have already happened by the time I put this out, but we're very close to hitting 50,000 subscribers, which is absolutely amazing. I'll probably do a little video saying thank you once Yvonne gets back because she's still in the Netherlands. But when she gets back, we'll do a little thank you video. Something just to say thanks for the support because it's pretty amazing in my mind. Like 50,000 people have been willing to hit that button. And if you haven't subscribed, this is a perfect time to subscribe to get me over the 50,000 mark. If when you're watching this, it hasn't happened. So yeah, hit the subscribe button and like these videos because it really helps keep me motivated, and it also helps YouTube know that people want to see this content. So let's get into the two meetings. Let's first talk about the former president that came to China. And it's kind of, I guess we'll just talk about both of them at the same time. These two visits, I feel, are not really important. And that might be a take that you guys don't agree with, but I kind of feel like nothing's really going to change. And I think this is a lot of just kind of PR, political kind of grandstanding at best. So the former president Ma came here to China and he did a little tour around and he met some people, and he doesn't really have any power, I guess, because he's not the current president of Taiwan. And I'm sure he has political connections and he has some influence, but this is all just grandstanding because there's an election coming up in Taiwan, and obviously Beijing wants the KMT to get elected. The KMT is more pro-Beijing, and they're talking about trying to normalize relationships and possibly even unification at some point in the future. So, of course, Beijing supports that policy. And so this was a PR play. I mean, it's historic in the sense that it's the first time it's happened, but I don't think it's going to lead to very much. Same thing with the current president who went to New York, and then she also went to the Reagan Library, I think it was, in California, and met with the Speaker of the House, McCarthy. Again, these are not really, I don't feel like they're really important other than just escalating things in an unnecessary way. This response from Beijing with the kind of military drills and the showing of force around Taiwan right now, it doesn't help the situation in my mind. I could be really wrong. Maybe you guys have more insight on it, but I feel like it's just media and nothing really high level is going to come of it. I mean, I guess you could say the current president of Taiwan was wondering where her weapons are. Apparently, they've bought around $19 billion worth of weapons from the United States that haven't been delivered, and they're saying, hey, we bought these. You guys are saying that a war is coming, so we kind of need those weapons. Please deliver them. But other than that, I feel kind of like it was mostly a PR campaign, a PR stunt, so to say, on both parts. Honestly, the bigger issue with that is it feels like it's just designed to create reactions from both sides. And I personally don't think those are the reactions we want. Beijing shouldn't respond, in my opinion. Again, this is just me, a nobody talking about my opinion. I don't think that they should respond with military force every time there's a provocation, every time the president of Taiwan sneezes, or every time America says China shouldn't do this or that. I would say it's almost more powerful to step back and say, this meeting is meaningless, so therefore we won't react because we know it's meaningless. And it's a panic move by Taiwan to try and fly down to Central America to try and shore up the little support they have left with these, I think, again, police in Guatemala, where they're like, hey, please don't abandon us because everybody else has. And so this reactionary behavior, I think, is a little bit unnecessary. But again, it's my opinion. Let me know if you have a very different take, which I'm sure some of you do. I just think at the end of the day, we should really start listening more to what the Taiwanese people who are Chinese, what they actually want. Maybe they want to be left alone and say, look, let us resolve this issue ourselves with China, or let us resolve this issue ourselves in general. I think the meeting with Macron was more interesting. This was kind of like the first big state visit since the COVID policies from like a European, like kind of a Central European country. And they rolled out the red carpet for him. They were very hospitable. And I think what China's doing with their policy, and this is what they've been doing for a long time, is providing an alternative. And specifically providing an alternative to the U.S., where they are willing to go to South America, they're willing to go to Europe, they're willing to go to the Middle East, or even Africa or wherever else around the world, and say, look, the United States hasn't always treated its partners with respect and mutual understanding. A lot of times it's been dictated how countries should behave, and if they don't behave this way, then there will be consequences. Oftentimes monetary consequences, sometimes military consequences. And, that's very much a tactic of do what we tell you to do. It's kind of like a bully, right? China has been going around and saying, we want to work with you, and we do work with you, so we have trade partners and trade agreements all around the world. If you work with China, we'll treat you like a business partner and not like a vassal state or like a subordinate where you should listen to us. Now, will that policy change if they, succeed in dethroning the United States? Yeah, probably. Because once they have all the power, then they have the ability to make the rules. And that's kind of the struggle that we're in right now. The United States is in this issue of they want to make the rules, but less and less people want to follow the rules, and China's been giving an alternative. And so when President Macron comes here, he's put in this position of how do we balance our interests with NATO and the United States with our interests with China when those are somewhat in conflict. And I think we're going to see this more and more, that countries are going to have to balance this. Do we continue to listen to the United States, support the United States, or do we jump ship and help China, like do business with China, and potentially end up under the boot of China? That's the fear, because it's kind of like the master or the devil versus the one you don't know. We don't know how China's going to behave if they dethrone the United States and become the superpower. Now, China at this point in time has said that we are looking for a multipolar world where the United States can be powerful, and so can China, and so can Russia, and so can Saudi Arabia, and maybe Germany and France can be, the bigger powers in Europe, right? So it's kind of this balancing act. It's like when you go to a buffet, you're at some kind of wedding and there's a buffet. You don't want to be the first one to go there and look greedy and people are like, oh, why is he getting all the food? But you also don't want to be the last one because then there's nothing left. So it's this weird balancing act of how do we work with China, who has this buffet, which is, number one trading partner for many countries, offering frameworks for peace in the Middle East and in Ukraine, trying to say that there's an alternative to the United States. Like, you don't want to be the first one, especially if you're like a European country. You don't want to necessarily be the first one being like, yes, China, 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 because you're going to be ostracized and people are going to say, oh, you're a puppet of Beijing. Oh, you're kowtowing to China. And so it's kind of this weird, how do you maintain that balance? And so with this, I think nothing really will come of it other than some trade agreements, right? Talking about buying more Airbus planes and things like that. These are all things that France desperately needs. So France is in that position where, of course, they're going to come here and play nice. There was some talk about don't sell weapons to Russia. There was some talks about, hey, talk to President of Ukraine, Zelensky. Also talk to Putin again and tell him to stop. So there was some of those, but it seemed maybe less muted than the United States would have liked to hear, coming from their partners, or who they believe are their partners in the in Europe. So I think that one was a little bit interesting. Again, probably nothing major will come of that, but it is interesting to see these state visits happening, and it's interesting to see how they're kind of playing out. Again, this isn't necessarily like a big take. I don't think any of these meetings that were happening last week were like groundbreaking. So we'll see. I think that it's just this continuation towards a multipolar world, and it's unclear if that will be better or worse, right? I mean, it's very unclear because all we have is what we can currently look at, which is the United States that oftentimes persuades, bullies, you can pick the word that you want to use, its partners to act in the interest of the United States, not always in the interest of themselves. And so that's what we have right now. Will China do that? We don't really know because we don't really have a clear indication of how that would work. We have some reports of other Asian countries that are upset with the way that China has been treating them, like in the Philippines complaining about fishing rights. We have some reports of African nations being somewhat unhappy with the outcomes of their Belt and Road projects or with pressure from the Chinese companies, but they got to weigh everything, right? What would you rather have? The United States, China, a mix of both, something completely different? I don't know. It was interesting because when I was looking to find information about the meeting between former president of Taiwan coming here to China, almost nothing came up. There was probably 15 results, and most of them were about the current president going to the United States, even though I typed in at the top Taiwan visit to China. It was almost all about the visit to the United States. So a lot of this news does get buried. Obviously, we know that. That's not anything new. But those are my takes. Nothing groundbreaking, nothing too interesting. Again, it's just this kind of slow march towards possibly a multipolar world, and it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. Leave a comment below and let me know if you saw something that I didn't, or if you have a different take on it. Because like I said, I do read the comments, and I do like to have conversations about these issues. And don't forget to subscribe because we're almost at 50,000, and that's pretty amazing if you ask me. I never thought that in a year we'd go from 5,000 to 50,000. So thanks for watching, and I will do a video very soon about the central bank digital currency because I find that far more interesting than these high-level talks. But But because I did a poll and you guys wanted this video, I did this video. So if you are looking for something else, you can click here.